Well, good afternoon, and I'm really thrilled to introduce Howard Croston. Howard probably doesn't need any introduction from me. World champion, designer of some of the finest gear that anyone's ever used for Hardys and Greys, and just all round one of the finest fly casters I think this country's ever produced. So on that rather glittering accolade, he's now going to show you shooting heads, and we don't use shooting heads as much as we ought, really.
No, definitely not.
So I'm going to hand over to Jonathan. I'm going to go back and have some sandwiches, discourage my dog from swimming across the lake, which he's done and upset one angler. So, Jonathan, over to you. Have fun.
Cool. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you very much, Charles. Right, Howard.
Yes, we're here.
We are. The wind keeps changing a wee bit. We were
does.
thinking about the other side, came over here, it switched again, but we will carry on. So what have we got set up with?
So what I've done, I've set a couple of rods up. I've set a shooting head rod up, like Charles mentioned. This is a 10-foot 8-weight. It's the Ultralite X, so it's our faster version of the ultralight range. So a real powerhouse, but still with quite a little bit of finesse to it as well. It's not just a broom shank. You know, it's a rod that you can cast a long way with, but it's got a nice progressive curve when you're playing a fish.
Fingers crossed we'll see that soon.
Well, no pressure.
Yeah, no
I've
pressure.
got an excuse. Charles' dog's been for a swim.
Absolutely,
so
yeah. Well, let's put that down already.
That's
set
ideal.
the foundations.
I was relieved when that happened. Then on the back end, one really important thing with shooting heads is you really need a large arbor reel. One of the issues is managing the running line, because it has a tendency to tangle. It doesn't matter what you do, it will tangle. So that big arbor, and this is the Grace fin reel, cassette reel, keeps that line in big loops.
Yeah, I've just recently done a review of that. We did a wee while back, and cracking value for money, you know, particularly if you're getting started but you want to carry a few lines, and it's a really good price point.
Perfect. And then on the business end, in terms of the line, it's a homemade shooting head. It's a long belly 8 that I've cut back at the rear taper, and I've attached it to some flat beam running line about 18-20 pound breaking string.
Okay, so relatively thin stuff. So.
Yeah, pretty much. And then I've got quite a long leader. The water's really nice and clear here, so I've lengthened the leader out. It's probably it's probably about 15 or 16 foot long, and there's a little bit of taper built in at the back end, which is going to help the head turn over, because one of the things with shooting heads, they really don't present that well.
That's for sure.
They can be a little bit bumpy when you throw them out there. Plus point goes a long way with not a lot of effort. So hopefully we'll get it out there, and I'll show you some techniques to do with the shooting head. After that, I'll switch over and I'll show you something a little bit different with the washing line. Variation on it that's absolutely lethal. Something that we've just been working on the last couple of years, and it's been a real good method. So we'll have a few casts, but I'll show you a few tricks as well with this. One of the things, whenever you're using a shooting head, you need some kind of line management. So be it a stripping basket like I've got there, or even if you've just got a landing net. A landing net can be used as a decent stripping basket. So all I've got, long handle landing net, and I've got a couple of tie wraps that are on my belt, and all I'll do is I'll put that handle down through there and use that as a makeshift stripping basket for when I'm handling all of that running line.
Because I know that there has been one or two manufacturers of landing nets that have made them so you can change the angle on it and stick them in the water.
Yeah, you can do that as well.
The same thing.
Yeah, same deal. I like it like this because when I move around and I move away from the net, it just goes with me.
Yeah.
So it makes it nice and easy. Now I'll show you a trick with heads, which is really important. When you come to strip the line off, the first thing you should do is strip the head out of the stripping basket. So for the first cast, I'm not going to strip it into there because I don't want to pile all the running line on top of the head.
Back to front.
Yeah. So that's going to go out on the grass. Now, the next trick is really, and this is where managing this running line becomes really important. If I just strip that off normally, you can see what happens. I get all of this kind of coil in the running line. Well, if I turn the drag up on the reel really high, basically full, then strip it off,
just taking that memory out.
You can see what happens. I don't have to stretch it now. So that's just basically pulling all of that memory out of that running line, nice and easy. I'm only going to strip off probably just over a fly line worth. I'm not really going to go for mega distance here.
Now, do you fish shooting heads a lot, or is it just an occasional thing? Or
for me, shooting heads, it's sort of like really fill a niche, really sort of fill a niche thing, which is when I want to get range and I want to cover a lot of water. I'll use them typically on quite pressured still waters.
Yeah, just to get that little bit further out.
Yeah, where those fish are just pushed, just out of comfortable casting range. Now, the other thing that's interesting here in this particular bit of water is that you've got like a long, shallow marginal shelf, and then it drops.
And it's quite a vicious drop. It's
Yeah.
not gradual.
So what I'm going to do is effectively fish behind that drop, which is probably right on the limit of a lot of people's casting range. But with a head, hopefully, it's going to go. Now, one thing, it's just for safety's sake, obviously glasses all the time, but I've got that wind pushing in off my right shoulder, so I'm going to go backhanded with the cast. I'm not going to throw over my right shoulder, I'm going to throw off my left shoulder, just to basically keep it safe and downwind of me. Now, the big mistake a lot of people make with these shooting heads is, it's a typical man thing really, it's when you
That has been said a few times already today.
Yeah.
I know what you're going to say.
Me cast far, that's how I put it. It's like a caveman, I'm just going to hit it as hard as I can. Shooting heads go a long way without being hit hard, that's what they're designed for. So I'm going to double haul, obviously, smooth application of power. And just let it go. So I've got a reasonable distance there. It's probably gone about, I don't know, might have made 30 yards. But now I can go to the pan, use the pan of the net, put the rod under my arm. One thing with a shooting head, I don't like any retrieve other than a roly-poly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stretch in this, There's a lot of stretch in that line. If I pull, there's too much stretch.
Yep.
If I maintain a constant retrieve, rod under the arm, roly-poly in, I keep good contact, and when I get a take, I can react to it and set the hook, or just keep pulling until I get a really firm lock up. Yeah. And everybody thinks the roly-poly is this mindless strip it retrieve. It's not. You can really work it.
Yeah, mix it up. It doesn't have to be one constant pace, and equally it doesn't have to be at breakneck speed either.
No, that's it. Steady away, just keep it moving, bump it a couple of times, let it drop. Work it back. Now what I will say is, it doesn't matter with a shooting head. It doesn't matter how good your line management is, whether you use a basket or a net, you're going to get tangles in the running line. It's just one of those things. You can't do anything about it.
No, the man that invents running lines that won't tangle will be quite a rich man, I expect.
Absolutely. Right, so we'll have another quick cast.
Now, it's an interesting one. We get asked about shooting heads, and I can't really think of anyone that manufactures a sort of shooting head for single-handed stuff that's sort of readily available. And so people do think about buying a fly line, cutting it back, messing about, putting some mono on the back, but they automatically, instantly think that it's going to make him cast 50 yards.
Yeah.
And it's not. You do have to look at your technique. You do have to change things. You don't want necessarily super tight loops, because you want it to hold its shape for a little bit longer.
Yeah,
so you
100%.
want maybe a 3 to 4 foot loop rather than a 18-inch 2 foot loop.
Yeah, I mean, tight loops are great. From a casting perspective, they do a lot of things. Help you with wind, help you with accuracy, do a lot of good stuff. In fishing circumstances, a lot of the time, you don't want that picture perfect catalogue style razor shaped loop. You just don't. I mean, if you've got multiple flies on, especially,
You definitely don't.
you need a wide open loop, So a lot of my casting when I'm fishing looks very, very different to the casting I'm doing in a casting competition or on a platform when I'm trying to make it look good. So what I'll often do, and you'll see with this next cast, I'm going to drop the rod tip a little bit on the stroke, on the forward cast. And that's just opening the face of that loop out. And you can see it turns over nice, and there we go,
Yeah.
first angle.
It's, as you say, it's inevitable. But if you manage it well, and the way you pull that line off to get most of those coils out in the first place, it's gonna mitigate it to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But as you say, it's inevitable that it's going to happen. Especially when you start really, particularly if you've got a wind on your back and you're really pumping out some long distances, you might have 40 yards of mono in your basket. That's a lot of opportunity for it to get itself tangled up.
It's a lot of tangles. I mean, the thing where it makes up for itself is if you're taking, 7 or 8 and 9 false casts to sort of get out to full fishing range, say a full fly line. With a shooting head, you can typically do it in 2, maybe not even that.
Yeah.
So what you lose in that little bit of untangling, you'll often gain in actual fishing time.
Yeah. I mean, talking about getting that extra little bit of distance. I mean, we see it here. It's as you say, gin clear water, and when we have a busy day, as the start of the day is, the fish are quite close, they're hugging that drop off, and as the day progresses and a bit more traffic goes around the lake, and as people moving up and down, they do push out, and you notice that the guys that are casting the shorter distances are now no longer in the regular takes they were before, and the guys that are managing that extra 5, 7, 10 yards, they're the guys that are still catching fish.
Yeah.
So that little bit extra that the shooting head does give you in the right hands certainly can be a massive advantage.
100%. So what I'm going to do, I've had like 3 casts and I've not had a take. So like the competition angler in me now says to me, right, there's something not right. We've got to change something. So all I'm going to do now is just let that drop. So I'm keeping a little bit of tension on it, but I'm just letting it fall. So I'm not actually really moving it, I'm just keeping the tension to the fly. So I'll let it have about a 5-second drop, and now I'll start moving it. And just see whether swimming it back that little bit deeper is the ticket.
Yeah.
We've got, to be honest, good conditions now. They've improved a lot from this morning.
Bit of cloud, which is...
Yeah, it was really sunny first thing.
It's quite an unusual water here at times, because even on the brightest of sunny days, the fish for some reason don't shoot down to the bottom. They normally stay sort of top 4, 5 feet at worst. So you don't often need to get out with a sort of dive 5s, dive 7s and really get down and dirty. They seem to always be looking up.
Yeah, I mean, you do tend to find that as well in like these really clear venues where they can see everything that's, see a long way, see everything that's going on. I mean, they can't see my fly at the minute because they're completely ignoring it, but
No, and it's nice that we've got such an abundance of insect life here as well. That I know you're on a small snake at the moment, aren't you? So it's something a little bit bigger, a bit more gaudy than flies a lot of people might necessarily fish. But if you like dry fly fishing, you like nymph fishing, we're full of buzzer, we're full of bloodworm. There's pond olives, there's mayflies, loads of caddis. So we've got a real abundance of aquatic insects here, and the fish hone in on them very soon, even after just being stocked. So, if you like upper water fishing, traditional twiddly, it's lovely. Perfect. For that.
Yeah, and we're going to do a little bit of that after this. I mean, I'm quite insulted of your description of my snake, Jonathan. I mean, it's not exactly gaudy,
Well,
I'm calling it a damsel.
A damsel.
That's, it's a snake
the
damsel.
damsel tandem.
Oh no, single hook. Single barbless hook.
Damsel with the trailing single.
Yeah, that's the one.
The damsel in distress.
That's it.
No, I mean, as you say, with this clarity, it's if a trout gets within sort of 6 feet of these flies, then you'd like to think there's going to at least inspect.
Yeah, and to be honest, the snake is a really good fly for pressured fish.
Yeah.
Because when they have a little nibble at it, they often catch the hook that's just at the back there. And typically you get them right in the outside of the mouth. So it makes for easy unhooking and the fish go back on the way without any real harm.
I mean, we're one of the very few fisheries around here that actually practice catch and release.
Okay.
Which for our regulars, they love it, because nobody wants a freezer full of fish. You get to the point where pubs won't take them, neighbours see you coming back from a day's fishing and the curtains close, and because they know what's going to happen next is in 20 minutes time they'll get a knock at the door with half a dozen gutted trout saying, would you like a trout?
That's it.
So being able to put them back is a really good thing, and it's, if done properly, catch and release is a fantastic thing, and it's just so good for the fisheries and for the anglers. it's something that people always used to think, well, once a fish has been caught, you're never going to catch it again. Well, we know full well that there was one single tiger trout in here because it went in here by mistake, should have been in the other lake, and it's been caught and released 4 times so far.
Yeah.
So fish don't suddenly stop feeding because they've been caught once. You'll just have to change your method of attack to catch them. Once bitten, twice shy. They might not necessarily go for a cat's whisker the second time round.
No, I mean we've got a lot of catch and release fisheries up where I live in the north, and some of those fish do get caught quite a lot and wise up. And some of our fisheries again have got a lot of natural food life in them, and they do quite well.
Yeah,
a lot of natural feed in some of them for them. And
I mean, what used to be one of our record fish here, record rainbow, I think it was just over 14 pounds, was caught on a Saturday on that side, and I think was caught from this exact peg the following Sunday.
Wow.
And we knew it was exactly the same fish. We had the photos. It was the same fish, a week apart, and it had been in the water for about 3 months.
It just goes to show. I mean, fish are a little bit like people. They're not all that bright. Some of them,
That's for sure.
They do vary in intelligence. Fish like anything else, I think.
Any knocks or touches yet?
I've not had a single knock, which I'm blaming on Chelsea's Labrador.
Well, absolutely.
So 100% he's getting the blame for that one.
Well, it's always the same. You came and had a little bit of a recce this morning and found it to be relatively good going, didn't you?
Yeah, I had quite a few fish. I had 4 on the snake and I had 3 on the washing line. Oh, now that's interesting actually. I'm sure what's just happened there. My knot at the back of the shooting head's failed. So how I attach the head to the back of the running line is I have a braided loop that's actually whipped with thread on the back of that line, and then I just use a half blood that goes straight onto that loop.
Okay.
Now that's been on there for about probably a good 18 months, and I've not had it out probably in the last 6 months.
Right.
And I haven't checked it, so that's just let go now on me, which is a good point, to be fair. When it comes to connections on fly lines and loops and all that kind of stuff, they're a common point of failure, so that's my bad. If that was in a major competition,
you'd be
happened.
killing yourself.
Well, I wouldn't. My teammates would be killing
No.
me. That's what it actually happened.
The good news is, because on the back of that you had a fluorescent yellow braided loop, I can still see it, but I think it's going to be about 3 inches above your welly height. So it might just have to be one you'll take for the team there.
Well, to be honest, I think, seeing as Charles put his dog in earlier on, I think we should send Charles in for it. That's what I would like to do, but,
Sending the dog in.
So rather handily, that's about the point I was going to change to the
Perfect
washing
timing.
line, honestly. So we'll pick up the other rod and I'll talk you through something with that.
So things, even for world champions, don't always go perfectly right.
No,
We are at the
absolutely
end of the day only human.
So now I've got full expectation that this won't work either now.
And now the clouds just decided to disappear and the sun's come out.
Yeah, now I've put the method on for fishing in the top of the water. The sun's come out and sent them all down to where the snake was. So, I'll be honest, I would rather use my luck up in big competitions than anything else, and I have done a few times. So I'm going to show you something with the washing line, which is a little bit different. So rod wise, I'm on the 10 footer now and the 7 weight, not the 8 weight, because I want a little bit more finesse really. It's still the X model, so it's again nice and fast but with a bit of progressive action. Again, a large arbor reel. There's not really any point not having a large arbor reel
these days. Absolutely.
They're so light still and everything, and keep your line in big coils. That's the Ultra disc. Then I've got a straightforward weight forward 7 floater with a 10-foot floating poly leader, and then my leader's made up of 6-pound fluorocarbon. And what I've actually got on the point, I've got a small booby. To be honest, it could be anything. It could be
any buoyant fly.
any buoyant fly just to hold it up. Fab anything, or even a suspender buzzer. To be honest, they work really well when you've got a lot of buzzers coming off.
Yeah.
Even on the washing line. Now, where this setup really differs is on the droppers. So the normal setup on the droppers for a washing line, you're using like a Dalback or a cormorant, but they're nearly always unweighted. Now I fish mine with tungsten beads on them. So my 2 middle droppers have got tungsten beads either up near the head or in the back of the bend. I do tie one with it in the back as well. Now, that has a few different effects when you're fishing. One of them is, and this all comes from like competition background, when you're trying to maximise your chances of catching fish. If you think about it, those buzzy pupae and the hatching and stuff, they're often coming up and down in the water column in that sort of zigzaggy movement. When I fish these, because they've got a little bit of weight in them, but because they're stretched out between the floating line and the floating point fly, what happens is, as these are sinking, the descent is controlled, so it's quite a slow, steady drop down through the water if I just leave it out there. It just sinks nice and steady. But as soon as I move the line, because these are weighted, they jump up in the water, but then they drop again very quickly. So I get this really over-exaggerated action on them two middle flies. And it really does sometimes seem to make a massive difference to the takes to those two middle flies. The other thing it tends to do is this buoyant fly on the point, which is sort of sitting up here, as I pull the line, this often dips under, pops back up again. So we get this sort of double seesaw effect of the tungsten sinking, coming up nice and attractively, the point fly going and rising nice and attractively, and you're covering a lot of bases with one method. Much more so than if you had unweighted flies in those two middle droppers.
I notice your droppers are quite long there. Is that normal kind of length for you there?
Yeah, I use relatively long droppers. I find they tangle that little bit less.
More fly changes potentially before you got to re-rig.
Yeah, I like the slightly longer dropper. And what happens, because these got tungsten beads on as well, you'll see they hang nice and proud away from the line. They tend not to wrap quite as much.
No.
What I will do, I'm going to throw backhanded again. And again, I'm going to throw that wider loop, because those three flies, and the one on the point's not particularly aerodynamic either. I want to try and keep everything open and away from itself.
You on a shooting head again now?
No, this is just a straightforward, weight forward floater.
Okay, because I was going to say you should check the knot if you are.
So I've got it out there, and the first thing I'm going to do with it, it's landed nice and straight, that. First thing I'm going to do with it is nothing. There is this thing with people, the second that fly lands, they've got to start bringing it back. I see it all the time. You get the fly out there and they have to start moving it. A lot of the time, I'll catch a lot more fish by throwing full distance and just letting it sit there and letting it drop. Because if I've got fish out there cruising, not over this shallow marginal shelf because they've been pushed out to range, there's a better chance of them finding it if I leave it there longer. So all I'm going to do is keep tight to it and bump it literally an inch at a time. So the length of time my flies are in the water is way longer. You know, if I was retrieving it like this or fast figure eighting it, I'm bringing it in away from the fish, assuming they're out there, away from the fish and into this shallow edge. I'm just going to let it swing and bump it every so often.
Now, would you normally, once you've made the cast, you say you'd leave it, do you ever give it a couple of pulls to make sure everything's straight in case somebody takes on the drop so you can feel it?
Yeah, I mean that cast, luckily, because we're downwind here, that cast landed bolt straight.
Yeah, but if it hadn't done...
If it hadn't, I'd have straightened it immediately.
Yeah, perfect.
You know, you've got to get that constant tension to your flies.
It's so common that you get a take on the drop, and if you're not in contact on a relatively tight line, you don't even know it's happened.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you want good turnover whenever you can get it, and straight line contact to the flies. The only way really to do it.
And you had a bit of success on this morning?
Yeah, this was, I had 4 on the snake and I had 3 with this. So plan A is out the window now, it's lying on the bed of the lake, which we'll have to recover slightly later on. So we've gone down to plan B. We're running out of time, it's not looking good.
I think Mr. Jardine is going to have some kind of attack.
I'm almost in tears here because I know what it's like.
I mean, I'm just glad it's not the world's, that's all I can say.
Absolutely. And were you finding that the takes you were getting this morning, were they just on the drop-off or were they that little bit further out?
They were all at range.
All at range.
They were all at range. in the horrible conditions when they were feeding voraciously. Now it's improved. They've all swam to the platform at the other side of the lake, which I told you would happen. But, you know, that's just the way it is.
Right, so it's been a bit of an odd one today because, I mean, the wind direction was really awkward. I mean, we do a lot of these demos off the platform because it's convenient for us to do it and people can see nice and easy. So we came this side, and then, of course, everything's changed. But, you know, if you were ordinarily, say we're here now, if you just came and approached this place for the first time, where would you, as it is right now, where would you head for straight away?
So I'll be honest, any time I turn up at a fishery or any kind of lake, 9 times out of 10 you'll find me on the downwind bank.
Yeah.
Fishing up, straight up into the wind, because a lot of the fish will push on the wind. A lot of the food is on that downwind bank. You can get an undertow, which is swilling food around for them as well. The reason I came over here was because we were using the shooting head, and this is a good point really. Shooting heads are great with a following wind or across a wind. They are absolutely hopeless into a headwind. The reason being, once you launch that fly line, once that fly line's travelling and it's just pulling that thin running line, all that's keeping it going is that loop unfurling in the air. There's no connection to you really, you've just almost thrown a weight. And the wind can do too much to the back end of the line. It all becomes unstable, the running line's blowing all over the place, and you just don't get any turnover and really any distance. You know, and it's a little bit the same with weight forwards. Some weight forwards with a longer belly are great into a wind. Short-headed ones with an aggressive, almost shooting headlight profile, not good in a wind, really. They're a little bit too unstable. So we'll have another quick throw. Straighten that up a little bit. I'm going to let that sit again for a minute or two, and then I'm going to start moving it back. What I always try and do when I'm doing any kind of method like this is look as far down that fly line as possible. I'm looking for any little kinks in that line to straighten, for anything to move and pull that line. I mean, right about now would be handy. I'm just giving it.
How are you finding the takes this morning? Were they just subtle, or were they a real good thump? Or
I would say that they were purposefully misleading me for this demonstration. I mean, literally, they were nearly dragging me into the lake.
Yeah.
They were just. They were absolute lurching takes. You know, they were just sailing away with it.
And what sort of breaking strain of leader are you? I presume for this you're using fluorocarbon?
Yeah, this is fluorocarbon. It's 6 pounds. It's 6 pounds on the label. In truth, it's probably more like 7.5. It's quite strong. It's quite a thick fluorocarbon. It's nice and clear though, obviously. So in the clear water, it's not really an issue with that. And you know, the last thing you want to do is start leaving flies in fish if you can help it. You want to be able to play them fast. I'll always err on the side of caution. I'll only go very, very light when I have to.
No, I mean, my competition days are a fair way behind me now. So, particularly, I fish a lot of catch and release. So, you know, here I'm often using 9.5 pounds. I'm not out to catch every single fish that swims out there, but the ones that I do catch, I want to make sure I get them in quick. And the faster I can get him in, the better they swim away.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. There's nothing worse than overplaying a fish.
No.
You know, you get them in, get them back, and let them go nice and quick. What is interesting now, which, I mean, there's no fish on the end, so that bit's not interesting, but what I can show you now is, as I'm bringing this rig into the shallows, if I didn't have a washing line type setup on, and I was just slowly nymphing back, I would now have to really speed that up to fish this marginal shelf, because otherwise I'm just going to drag the bottom.
Yeah.
But with this kind of setup, you can fish really close in and keep the flies clear of the bottom. So they're sitting in the zone where the fish should really be.
Now we do find here, with the way the shelves are, every bank on the lake here has got a shelf of some sort, and they vary in how far they go out. But we do find a lot of the fish, they love to hug that drop off, because it's a fairly vicious drop off. It's not a long, slow shelf. It's fairly straight down. and they just find going along there, particularly when you see flies hatching, and you'll see them, and you'll see it just start to pop all the way up the lake at that sort of same distance. They'll move up the wind, taking dries, but just making sure you've got your flies at least the other side of that. It's so important.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, those drop-offs in any lake, I mean, it's like river fishing. Fish love structure, be it drop-offs or anything like that, points, promontories, anything. They'll, and you do get a lot of buzzers in that sort of magic, sort of like 5 to 10 foot depth, particularly along the edge of a drop-off. I mean, not this drop-off, obviously.
No,
I mean, there's absolutely nothing around this drop-off. They're all on the other one now, but I'm just going to let that swing a little bit.
Now, ordinarily, would you sort of give this another 5 minutes and then think, right, well, I've given it a go, I've given it a couple of different techniques, now it's time for a change of scene?
To be honest, I would have, if we weren't doing this, I would have changed more than once by now.
Yeah.
I would have been messing around, give it a couple of soaks, a couple of decent casts. If it's not gone, I would be doing something. I would be changing the point fly. I would be maybe changing where I've got the weight on the cast, trying to probably go a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Because I'm not seeing anything. I'm not seeing any fly. I'm not seeing any fish move. So there's a good chance I'm above them, to be honest. Now, you should still see it. There's a good chance they'll come up through the water column to eat it, but not always, Now,
I know you said you've got a 10-foot floating poly leader on there.
Yeah.
Would you look to maybe change that to a 10-foot intermediate, or just to get down that little bit more? Would you change tactic altogether?
I'd probably change the line to a midge tip.
Yep.
And drop down a little bit deeper in the water column. I am going to change the fly quickly on the point. I'm going to put something with a little bit of weight on. I'm going to throw it out there and just see whether or not those fish are that little bit deeper. So you can see, it's interesting, because I've got those tungsten beads on. I mean, look how straight them droppers are.
Yeah.
They've not wrapped or anything. They're standing nice and proud off the main line. No curls in or anything like that. Because a lot of the time, with unweighted flies, they really badly wrap.
Yeah, they do.
And it's the same with if you tie your flies on curved shank hooks. Nearly all of my flies are on straight shanked hooks with the point in line with the shank.
Yeah,
They
not
don't,
offset.
they don't
Yeah.
spin as much. I'm just going to change flight.
And I mean, a typical kind of day, if things aren't going your way, how many times do you think you'd probably change either tactics or fly patterns? I know it's a bit of a how long's a piece of string question, but...
Yeah, I mean, one of my adages that served me really well over the years in the comps is make it happen.
Yeah.
If it's not happening, make it happen. Keep changing things, rotating flies out, methods, retrieves, whatever you need to do to get it going again. So what I've done, I've put a little white beaded black buzzer on the point there. I'm going to give that a go.
Is that a fly you have lots of success with?
Well, I used to. I mean, I'm going to throw it in here now and probably nothing's going to happen. So, but we'll see.
And so that's a little tungsten bead, you say?
Yeah, it's a little tungsten bead on the point now. Now, what is going to happen now, I am going to have to change the way I fish. I can't effectively fish those 3 flies all the way back to the bank. So what I'm going to do again, I'm going to let it drop and I'm going to let it get some depth at range. Keep nice and tight to it, move it a little bit every so often.
Where your flies landed there, you're around about 13 to 14 foot.
Okay, well that's good to know. That's going to give me a lot of water to play with at that range. I'm just moving that fly back nice and slow. What I am going to do is when I feel the bottom, of the lake, it's most likely going to be the point fly, obviously. I'm not going to bring it back straight away because I've still got 2 other flies in play which are hanging, in the water column. So I'm going to use that point fly rubbing bottom to fish those two droppers a little bit
So
better.
sacrificially, if it catches up.
Yeah. And sometimes what I'll do is when I feel tension, when I feel the bottom with the point fly, I'll just stop and let it sit. So now effectively I've got it strung out there, sitting in the right place, and see if I get a take. Sometimes it's interesting as well, and again this is just the comp angler coming out in me. If I'm fishing and you're getting a lot of fish on the drop, but you don't get a lot in the retrieve, what I'll typically do, and a lot of competition anglers I know will do it as well, they'll throw it out, they'll fish the drop, they'll let it go down. If they don't get a fish, just rip the whole thing back in again.
And go again.
Throw it out again. Because there's not much point in retrieving through 20 yards of dead
what
water.
could be another 2 or 3 casts, yeah.
I'm starting to contact bottom there now, so I'm just going to let it sit for a second or two and go again with a slightly longer cast. There's the bottom, I think. I mean, I did that automatically as well. When I got tension, you saw it. What I didn't do was that.
Yeah.
If you do that, flies away, it's out the water, it's away from the fish. If I pull, I'm still getting the same effect of setting the hook, but I leave the flies in play. So it gives me another bite of the cherry.
Yeah.
You know, because sometimes they will come back.
Straight out the saltwater playbook.
Yeah.
Don't trout set. So, I mean, you're obviously, as we discussed earlier, a world champion, adept at fishing, saltwater, stillwater, rivers. What's your favourite?
I love all fly fishing. I mean, this isn't my favourite at the minute. It's not going.
This is going rapidly further downhill.
This has gone down the list, but no, it just shows. I mean, it happens. There's nothing you can do about it. For me personally, being on the river, sort of big wild brown trout early season or any time of the year, to be honest. I just love river fishing and I love sight fishing.
Yeah.
A bit like yourself, I've got a soft spot for permit. I love permit fishing in the salt, but it's one of those things, we can't do it every day.
No, God, I wish we could. It's been a few years since I've had a chance to do it. I don't know when I'll get a chance to do next, but I've very much laid the foundations of telling my fiance wherever we go on honeymoon there will be rods packed. So at least I've got that bit out of the way first.
Yeah, I'm similar. But I mean, this is a bit like permit fishing, to be honest. I haven't. This is how most of the permit fishing tends to go. Inactive.
Yeah. You develop very strong feet permit fishing.
It's really interesting how things can change in little more than an hour. Mm-hmm. I mean, this morning the conditions, I really wouldn't have given you much for them, but for whatever reason there was a good number of fish here. They were cruising. Here comes a fish. It's cruising along the bank. I haven't really got the right kind of rig on for it, but I'm just going to lay the droppers in its path, see whether he'll have it. No, didn't even look at it. He's a fast cruiser, so he's moving really quickly. Quite often when they're moving fast like that, they're not actively feeding. Oh no, he's turned on it.
Ooh.
Changed his mind again.
Bit of interest is always good to see, though. If he just cruised on past that second cast, I guess you probably wouldn't have even bothered with a third.
No, I mean, he turned on it the second time, and then saw the camera and shot to the other side of the lake.
Is that Mr. Jardine over there? Oof.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I've always liked Charles, but he's gone down the list after that. Right.
Just blame the elderly, why don't you?
I'm catching you up, Charles.
No one could.
So obviously we set up these two outfits now. We've given this a bit of a go. You've changed that point from the buoyant fly to the little small tungsten beady fly to get down a bit more. What would your next step be?
Is there a pub nearby? So probably, I would probably change area.
Yeah.
I would probably move. There's not fishing everywhere in the lake.
No.
And they move around. There's, and a lot of the time, I mean, to be honest, if this was a pleasure day, coming to the top of the wind was probably one of the last things I would do. I would start along that downwind bank.
Yeah.
But because we wanted to use the head a little bit, I wasn't able to show you how to throw that effectively into a wind, so it just wouldn't work. So
a bit of cloud cover coming over.
yeah, that'll bring them up in the water to where the washing line would have been a good method.
Perfect.
So, I mean, I can't believe you've not organised the conditions for me.
It's been so changeable of late. I mean, we've had 18, 19, 20 degree daytime temperatures followed by -5 nighttime temperatures. The next day of +3 daytime temperatures. It's been so up and down like a yo-yo. At times you think there's no way these fish are going to feed, and there's been howling winds, and then someone's gone out and just plugged away with a damsel and come back in with sort of 8, 9 fish. And you're thinking, well, number one, I probably wouldn't have gone out and fished myself for a pleasure day in conditions like that, but you've done nothing particularly taxing, but they're obviously still on the feed, they're still hungry, and you've just plugged away and got your just a dessert. So
yeah, I mean, we're in really the golden window for fishing at this time of year.
I love this time.
You know, everything's starting to get going, the rivers, the lakes. You know, we've got insects hatching, you've got buzzers on the still waters, you've got olives and march browns on the rivers, and a lot can happen. But equally, it's been like that this week with the rivers. We've had a lot of instances where some days the fish have fed, you know, we've had insect and the fish have fed, and then the next day it's like there's not a fish in the river, a little bit like it is now.
Do you have a method you prefer for chasing your trout? Dry fly, nymphing, whatever's going to work?
I just like it all. I do like fishing the dries, and I like sight nymphing. I like the visual aspect of it. So now I've thrown that one a little bit more up the wind, and I've got the wind now is just sort of pushing it, and I'm just going to let it sweep a little bit.
So you'd fish it then it's slower because you've got that natural movement from the wind.
Yeah, 100%. And you see a lot of people just do the same retrieve, irrespective of what's happening out there, and watching the effect the wind's having on the line.
Yeah, I mean that's moved several feet already.
Yeah, and I'm doing nothing. I'm just holding on to it. Now with the big bow in the line, obviously you've got a little bit of a loss of contact, but you know, a good rod position, nice and low, and keeping everything tight. If the miracle happens and a fish actually eats it, I should have good, nice, straight contact.
It's funny you mentioned that about keeping the rod low. It's one of the first things, you know, we do the stillwater courses with guys that are first timers, and say, you know, their automatic thing is to sort of raise the rod to 3 or 4 feet above the water, and you're forever sort of pushing the rod tip back down again, trying to explain that, you know, if a fish takes, all that slack's got to be taken up first if your rod tip's high.
Yeah.
You have your rod as low to the water, or even slightly in the water, and the second you get that take, you're going to feel it, particularly with non-stretch lines as well. You're going to feel that and be in direct contact far more than the raised rod and all that slack.
100% right. I mean, you'll see when we competition fish on lakes and stuff, a lot of the time we kneel down or sit down, because if you see a lot of people fishing like that, and you just lose some of the contact, you know. Just do me one favour, Jonathan. Just pull that line, because I couldn't remember what it felt like. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss it if it did happen.
So this is it's like when you're competition casting and you go and do 2 hours of practice beforehand, and you cast yourself out, and then when it comes to the actual competition, you throw 10 feet shorter than you were in practice.
Oh yeah, I've done that
You've
as well.
come out and you've caught your fish already, you see.
I know, I wouldn't care, I left them alone and moved. I caught a few and then I moved, but somebody told the rest of them.
I mean, you've obviously, you know, with all competition anglers, whether you're current or not, you've always got that competitive edge, you want to catch fish. Do you have pleasure days where you just go out and think, I don't really care how many I catch? If something pulls back, that's great. Or are you always wanting to wet the net?
No, to be honest, I'm quite happy just going out fishing a lot of the time. And I don't. My competition practice tends to be specific practice. So I'm practicing something for either an event, a venue, or a method or a technique that I need to work on. A lot of the times, especially in the early season on the river, when it's rising fish, I'm quite happy walking around all day, and if I see a fish rise and get a couple of casts over it, I mean, it's nice to catch it.
Yeah.
But I'm not that worried if I don't, especially in the early season.
Just waiting on that small window, just one nice fish to come up and take some duns down. Or
Yeah, anything. It's, there's nothing better. Early season, big wild trout rising,
I mean, I haven't spent a lot of. I know obviously you're very good friends with Paul as well. I spent a lot of time with Paul. And are you the same kind of sort of? I'll sit and watch a fish and study how often it comes up and how many duns it does takes it before it misses one. Or
I'll be honest. I'm a little bit more aggressive than Paul probably. It's if I see it and it rises, it's getting the fly drifted through it almost straight away. I tend not, but that's that is a little bit the competition angler in me is being time aware.
So we've had a good go. We've tried very hard. I think one last final cast. Let's see if we can.
So there's pressure. Is
The
what you're
good
telling me.
good luck final cast.
Sometimes work better under pressure. Not always, but we'll try.
As a competition maestro, I should hope you work better under pressure.
So I'm going to ask you to if you guys can all just come to the other side of me, I'm going to go off the opposite shoulder and try a slightly different angle of attack. They have to be somewhere. Whoa. I've really felt pressure like this, mind.
It's been a bit of a grueler. I think you might have gone a little bit too hard too early this morning.
I know.
But it's been
Comments like that were really helping at this moment.
it's been very changeable. We've had sun, slightly heavier wind, clouds. It's changed even just the sort of time we've been doing this now, let alone this morning when at times it was really gusty. You've tried a couple of different methods. The one that you probably would have been banking on first was the snake.
Well, I'll mention that.
But that's fishing. It's never an easy game. If it was easy all the time, it'd be boring.
Oh, 100%. There's, I do fish quite a lot of these small still waters, and one of my biggest gripes is when you go to an incredibly well-stocked fishery that's got a lot of time and effort put into it, and there's loads of fish in it. There's loads of fish in it. And it doesn't fish brilliantly well for whatever reason, be it the weather or whatever, and then people will have a moan and say there's nothing in there or it's not.
We know it only too well, but you can't please all the people all the time. But it's been very interesting. We've picked up loads of great information, Howard. It's been a pleasure to watch a world champion casting and fishing. Sadly, nothing's pulled back yet, but we've got another 15 yards left of this one.
I've got 10 feet to make it happen. But
no, it's been really interesting to hear your views on and how you'd approach a fishery. Sorry you haven't managed to connect, but
it's operator error.
Operator
100%.
error.
Take full responsibility.
No, absolutely brilliant. We love the information. Can't thank you enough. I know it's a long way for you to come down, but hopefully next time there's more content to come. I hope you guys are loving it right now. Sun is shining on the righteous right now. Sadly no fish, but it's been very enjoyable, lots of information, and stay tuned, there's more to come.